everybody. This is the host Romey-Mak, and welcome to another segment of Interview with Rome. Today's guest is I'm so grateful, so thankful to have Miss Maura Sweeney with me. For those who don't know Maura Sweeney, she is a podcaster. She's an author. She's traveled to just multiple countries, just talking and speaking to folks, and also a former HuffPost columnist. So, there's so many things, so many questions that I have for her, and I'm hoping that, that she'll be able to provide so much information to not just me, but anyone that's listening who's just curious about their life, whether you're feeling down, and, because she has a quote where you're living happy inside out. But of course, without further ado, I want to bring forth the well accomplished with many accolades, Miss Maura Sweeney. Maura, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on.
John, thanks a lot. I'm glad we connected, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes. First off, look, I had the question to start off with you is, who is Maura Sweeney?
I could answer that in a number of ways. I'll tell you that I'm the trademarked ambassador of happiness, which is a great title, I would say, that describes who and what I am. But if you were to meet me on the street, I would hope that what you'd meet is someone who is very open to get to know others and to see the best in who and what they are. That's the best way I would describe myself.
Awesome. Okay, so hopefully by the end of this interview, I'll be a lot better than when I came in, with having you on the show. So I want to get a little backstory on you. Where did Maura grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey, northern Jersey, and to give you a perspective, it was a 1 square mile town. And if we went to the top of our town and looked from the vantage point of the town cemetery, we could see the skyline of Manhattan. So I was literally 10 to 15 minutes outside of New York City, but in many ways growing up, I felt like I was in the middle of nowhere's land. And my biggest thought was oh my gosh, if I could just get out of this town. And I actually felt like I was always hemmed in to the 1 square mile. Not only that I saw it as 1 square mile, but I actually felt mentally and socially like I was contained in this environment where everybody thought just as the people in that town thought. So that's the beginning of where I grew up.
Okay, and growing up near like the likes of a New York City, did you happen to get many pies out there, like pizza? Because I'm big pizza fan. Love New York pizza. So yeah, I would ask you that. How many chances did you have to indulge in such greatness as New York pizza?
Well, you'd be surprised. I heard this years ago. All right, the name of my town that I grew up in was Lyndhurst, New Jersey, 1 square mile. And somebody told me, it might have been my brother, that Lyndhurst, New Jersey at one point was actually known as the town that had maybe per capita the most or the best pizza places. Now think about that.
Wow.
There's something they say about the water that's up there, but we had pizza every Friday night. I would oftentimes have it on Saturday afternoon, sometimes Sunday. We had great pizza, and you know what? Down here in Florida, we don't have the same pizza, and a lot of people say it's the water. But we had lots of great pizza. Yeah,
it's definitely the water. I learned that from a fellow New Yorker that I work with right now. He told me it's like the water to use for like the crust and stuff determines the like that I would say like the taste, like the taste of great pizza, that is. He's like my pizza connoisseur. I always go to him, and like for me, I grew up, in Virginia, and so I got all the major chains and stuff. There's no really local pizza spot other than Chanello's. I guess that would be our local spot. Chanello's pizza was actually really, really good. But for me, it was stuffed crust. Stuffed crust was always it's like the greatest contraption of a pizza I've ever had in my life. I always said that, before they had their issues with the spokesperson saying stuff on Twitter, was it Papa John's? I said, if they ever were to get stuffed crust Pizza Hut would be out of business, because I feel like Pizza Hut is very, very greasy. Has a very, very greasy taste to it. And then Papa John's has got I like the way the Papa John's pizza tastes, but if they had ever got that stuffed crust, I was going to lose it, me personally.
Oh, funny.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So
I could tell you this much growing up. God forbid if we ever went to anybody's pizza place other than like a real pizza place.
Right.
We had a Pizza Hut somewhere, maybe in the next town over. Nobody went there. Nobody who wanted real pizza would ever go to anybody's chain. And yet we moved to Florida. There was no real pizza, so very funny. Depending on where you go, you know the real McCoy.
Exactly. It's like living in areas that have like little China. They have authentic, Chinese food versus the rest of us in America, like in America, that don't have. I'm sure there's some spots that do have like authentic Chinese food, but like for the most part, again, it's just these chains and stuff, in like food courts. Like I went to a Chinese spot and in the food court, and it was all black people working there. I was like, how does that work? Didn't
seem too authentic.
Exactly. It's like
right?
me going. It's like going into somewhat of I don't know, a Mexican spot, and there's all Asians working there. It's nothing to get. It's nothing to get. I don't doubt that the food probably doesn't taste good, but it just it just comes off like, oh wow, I didn't expect like you to be working there. But that's just it's just a little humor there. So when you were growing up, what did you envision yourself being? What were you going to be when you grew up?
How about if I answer this question this way? What did I want to be when I was growing up? Exactly what I'm doing today, or exactly who I am today.
Wow.
Except maybe younger. Yeah. And maybe I would say there's things still to come, which would be like the party to end all parties where everybody's invited. And I've shared this many, many times, but this is so real to me. As a preschooler growing up in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, when I was real small, we lived on a cul-de-sac. Loads of kids, because it was all new homes, probably during that baby boomer era. And I could remember watching airplanes fly overhead. They were going to and from Newark Airport. And for whatever reason, I would equate airplanes with travel around the world. And when I thought about travel around the world, I thought about people from every country, every nation, every culture, every appearance, every type of, clothing. And all I would do is think, oh my gosh, I want to get up in the clouds. I want to be aboard one of these airplanes, and I want to go and visit the world and be friends with the world. And that was my picture of what I wanted to do as a child. I literally imagined all these people around the world wearing all different clothes. Back then, I probably had a picture book as a little kid with people from every land all dressed up in their different native garb. And to me, that was an exciting thing. I wanted to meet these people. I wanted to learn about these people. And so here I am, decades later, even growing up with in an environment. I already explained the town. I felt like I was hemmed into this 1 square mile.
Yeah.
But I could tell you things like I had a great grandmother who never left her house. My mother was a school teacher, very bright, didn't want to leave the house.
They're sheltered.
And so here I want to visit the world. And so often I felt like I was literally chained to the front stoop. So I became, over the course of my lifetime, with decades of preparation, the ambassador of happiness, traveling the world, meeting people from so many different places, certain countries I probably never even knew existed, and literally finding ways to find common friendships, commonality. And if I could think about it on another level, and I don't know why I think of this, imagine the color of magenta, like a really bright fuchsia, pinkish, reddish, whatever.
Yeah.
I almost think about wherever I go, whether I'm visiting with people, interviewing with people like you, talking with people, doesn't matter, going to speak in different places, that something inside of me is like this magenta ribbon that somehow brings our humanity closer together. I always aim for those things of what lifts us up, what unites us rather than what divides us and brings us down. I think the world has had so much of that. So literally, what I had in my heart and my imagination as a child, I am doing today. So you could almost say I made up what it is I'm doing, and I created it, and it's made me happy, but there's still a great big party to come.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it. I hope I'm in attendance for the party.
Oh, you'd be more than welcome.
We got to make sure we get in before 12.
Okay.
It's free. Yeah, so let me ask you, so how did it feel to become Woman of the Decade? Yeah, that's such a great feat to have. And I'm sure it takes a lot of what you do into account to become Woman of the Decade. So yeah, just how did that feel becoming a Woman of the Decade?
I would say it made me smile. I received that award, I think it was last spring. I was in the Netherlands, in Holland, speaking at a women's forum. And it was an international event, and it was for women from the EU and from Africa. And the event itself was sponsored by an organization based out of India. And I mention all this to answer your question because the woman that runs this organization is such a woman of vision. She has literally connected women all over the world together. And I never apparently saw the world the way others did. I didn't realize this. I see people internally. I see their spirit. I see their hearts. I could feel maybe their intentions. And so the woman that runs this organization, and I think it's actually the largest women's organization in the world, is such a bright light. And she literally has done such great things that when she gave it, or whatever, presented me with the award, I just want to say it made me smile because I wasn't aspiring to get anything, but I felt honored and maybe satisfied. When I say satisfied, as if to say, wow, whatever it is that I've been doing, someone that I value in an organization whose heart I value is looking at me and thinking, we see what it is you're doing and we're acknowledging it. And I think, that's good for all of us in the world. We may all have different aspirations. How wonderful to be acknowledged for the very things that are important to us. And in my case, I was given Woman of the Decade, which I'm sure is for older women like myself, but it was for personal leadership. And if there's one thing I hope to inspire people to do, men, women, doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter the age, because I speak a lot to university students, is learn to be master and leader of your own life. Learn to lead yourself and lead yourself to becoming your best self. And so when I got the award, I guess I looked at it and smiled and I thought, well, I guess the very things that I was aspiring to, I am becoming. And this is maybe the world's way of saying, oh, look, we're acknowledging you for that. But I looked at it on another level and I thought, well, good, because this is just one more way that I can use to inspire other people to go and follow what they love so that they could be their best version of self and lead themselves in their best way.
All right. What do you feel like is your greatest strength?
My greatest strength is I could meet someone, and I'm a natural interviewer. I've always been interested in other people. I could find, I would say, the gems within people. Sometimes it's a talent. Sometimes it's a great personal quality or several qualities. I can literally see the gems that people are and bring it to light based on what they say or stories they tell me. And it makes me really happy to see people as brilliant elements and as stars in their own right. I just love doing that. I love it, whether they're 8 or 18 or 80.
Yeah. All right. So with that being said, what do you feel is your weakness?
My weakness is the opposite of the strength, in that because I don't look at people as age, gender, color, economic or academic background. I don't see people the way the world sees them. As a result, I can never, and I mean almost never, remember people's names and faces. You know how embarrassing that is? It's terrible, because I'm so busy connecting with them at a soul level or as a person-to-person level or heart-to-heart level that what the world looks at, I forget. or overlook because I'm too busy looking at the soul and the spirit of who they really are.
Okay.
That's my weakness.
All right. So being a speaker, you speak in front of crowds. I'm sure, like all the time. What's the largest crowd you've ever spoke in front of?
I was probably going to tell you that the largest crowd I've ever spoken would probably be on a radio crowd. I know I've been on several shows where they would have like 1 million listeners.
Yeah.
In terms of largest crowds, I would say easily like several hundred, 800, 1,000, I don't know, something like that.
Wow. All right. And do you ever get nervous speaking in front of, like, I would say, one, your radio crowd, and then two, your like the hundreds and thousands? Do you ever find yourself getting like nervous? Because me sometimes.
You would think. But I will tell you this. No, when it comes to speaking, I'm really not nervous. And but the thing that did make me nervous was as an author. For many years, I worked at corporate. I was supposed to be a lawyer. I left law school halfway through. I thought, I so don't want to be a lawyer. I ended up in corporate life. And all through those years, I had to always speak publicly. And I've done some other work like that over the years. But the big thing for me that did make me nervous, interestingly enough, was when I decided to go out on my own and speak my own words. So that meant I started blogging and writing stories. And for the first time, rather than telling someone else's story, or let's say giving a corporate story, or training people on academic type things, or whatever it was that I was teaching people about, I was then moving into a much more personal space. And I could remember when I first started writing, I used to go to a few writing workshops, I would say. And there were people who said to me, Maura, you're not being honest. And the reason why I was such a private person, I was struggling with how do I tell life stories that aren't just my story, but anytime you go through anything, you're really going through it with other people. And I think that I was always so polite and maybe trained this way to be very dignified that I had a difficult time telling real life stories and covering over sometimes for bad behavior. That was a very scary thing for me to do, to say, how do I express the stories of life I want to share without ever trashing anybody? I would never want to do that. And I just wouldn't, because I wouldn't want anybody to trash me. And that to me was the one place I felt scared. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to have to trust myself that I will learn how to do this process. But when it comes to speaking, I think I'm okay talking one-on-one, as you could tell.
Exactly. It takes, for me, I got to get started. I need, once I get it going, everything just flows so naturally. Like you saw, even in our pre-interview, it just, once you get that level of comfort, it's, you're good. But also don't want to stay in the comfort zone, if you know what I mean. You mentioned that you were going to be, you had stopped going to law school. How did your parents feel about that? I think many parents are like this. Sometimes wives, husbands, parents, whatever, may be like this. They get something in their mind, they fixate on it, and that's all they could see. For my family, they just decided, once my grandfather, who was an attorney, passed away, that I was going to be an attorney just like him. And so I was groomed and trained, and everything about my upbringing was all designed around that end. And I had to leave law school at the midpoint, when one day I literally couldn't get up from my chair to get myself into the car and drive myself to class. And then later that day, I tried opening my mouth to explain why I couldn't get to school, and no words came out. So, it was an interesting thing. And I think, I look at everything in my life, and I hope others do as well. We could look at things in our lives that are maybe challenges for us, and we could think, oh, poor me, or oh, I did this right or this wrong, or oh, look what happened to me. But I also tend to look at things as, how did each experience in my life help me to grow and become more of who I am? And I want to reference something else. When you said, when I was growing up, what did I want to be? I wanted to grow up happy and free to be who I was. Awesome. Yeah.
And there I was at 23, midway through law school, unhappy and not who I was. Looking at a career that was going to require me to probably live in New York metro area for the next 40 odd years, practicing in a career that would require so much energy to do what I didn't want to do and live in an area that really didn't appeal to me because I was more of a warm weather person. So here I am, and I look at all of it, and had I not gone through that time period of being groomed to be something I wasn't, I wouldn't be nearly as passionate as I am today, as I was as a mom, as I was even in corporate management, helping people find, discover, hone, and develop those talents and abilities and interests that they had so that they could be free to grow and to be their best self in those areas and arenas that were important to them. So what was that challenge for me growing up really becomes my calling card and my passion for all I'm about today, which is live happy from your insides out. Don't try to always be a picture of what you think other people want you to be. Be your best self, your brightest self, and compete with only yourself to be the best version of yourself. You'll be happy, you'll be confident, and you'll probably feel a certain level of personal freedom.
Okay. You mentioned obviously that you're married and you have a child. Let me ask you, how hard was that to I would say manage both mom life, married life, and pursue your own your own goals?
Well, I did tell you I'm older. I didn't even think I'd get married. I wasn't looking to get married, but believe it or not, my husband and I met in college. We were 19. He told me he fell in love with my mind. I fell in love with, I looked at this guy the very first time I met him, and I thought, wow, this is a guy who judges no one wrongly. He's comfortable in his own skin. He's not looking to impress anybody. And I remember having one other thought. He'd let me grow as much as I wanted to. And so we've been together literally since 1977. Imagine that. That's why I got married at 23. I will tell you this. I thought we'd probably have 4 kids. My original thought was we'll have 2 of our own and then adopt 2 kids from other countries. Would you believe we were married 11 years? I didn't even think I could have a child, could never get pregnant. Even trying to adopt other kids from other countries didn't work. And when I finally gave up, I got pregnant, had our first daughter, an only child. And here's the irony. By the time I did have our daughter, I was so burnt out with corporate life that I ended up being ready to stay home and be with her. And I actually did go to work for a short time after I had her. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be not as good of a manager, and I'm going to be not as good of a mother. And so what I ended up doing, John, is during that time period, even before I left work, I made sure that I took the income that I had and used it to pay off a lot of overhead debt so that in the event that I wanted to be home for a few years, I could be. And secondly, I ended up homeschooling our daughter. And by the time she was 13, I've done several things. So I really gave her a lot of what I had. But by the time she was 13, she was already enrolled in college. It was her choice.
Wow.
She was at a local college. And so I could almost tell you that I've had different times in my life where I've done different things, but wherever I am, I'll always give it my best. And I tell people too, sometimes people think, oh, you have to be like the best at everything. Sometimes we just have different chapters in our life, and we work and we do the best with wherever we are. And I want to say I was an older mom when I got married. I had the privilege of having a few years at home with her. But if you're not, you just do your best wherever you are. And then when our daughter was getting older, and my husband and I had built up another company, it was a computer rep firm. It was very profitable, but didn't really have any purpose. I remember thinking, you know what? I always knew I wanted to do something on a large scale, and I wanted to be a person of influence so that I could inspire people to think differently, think better, think more in a more united sense about the world and society. And it was during that point I thought, you know what? Our daughter's getting ready. She's going to go live 1,500 miles away. I'm going to pull out all the stops, and I'm going to just set out a goal of becoming one of the most influential women in the world. Funny. So there you are. Like, I could look at myself at different times and different chapters, and I just put my energies full time into whatever I could at that opportunity.
Yeah, I was, I'm listening. Obviously, we're listening, and we heard you say you homeschooled your child. How difficult was that to do, or how easy was it, rather?
I'll tell you, this is my personal feeling. growing up, I would have never wanted to be a homeschool child. There was no such thing as that. Maybe the Amish people did it back then. In fact, my thing was I wanted to be with everybody. I wanted to be in public school. I wanted to be with everybody. When we were raising our daughter, we had her in preschool, and because I mentioned my husband and I had this business, and my husband said to me, Maura, would you do me a favor? He said, please consider homeschooling for kindergarten. He said, because what we could do is travel off season, where it was the elbow season, it was less expensive, whatever. And he said, this way we don't have to take our daughter out of school. And I thought, that is the most antisocial thing I've ever heard, not to mention the fact we only have one child. Like, oh my gosh. But here's the crazy thing. I happened to be in an environment with a child who loved to learn. She was very, very self-motivated, very curious, and very animated in terms of picking up things in her environment. And so for her, she loved it. For me, I had a really good student. We both kind of grew together and learned together. But at the same time, it was like a chapter. It worked out well. And then by 13, she was ready to go to college, which cracks me up.
That is,
and it was a great opportunity for us to bond.
Yeah. Well, she can talk to my daughter, and wow, because my daughter's 14, and we're working out school kinks at the moment. But very, very bright child. So used to making like straight A's and stuff, and now faced with the challenge, scholastically. And we're gonna, me and her mother, we're gonna get through that together. Yeah, that's very interesting. Story on your daughter being homeschooled and ready for college. Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
Just because we're talking about homeschool, years ago when I was homeschooling, there were people that thought I was like super Christian, and I wanted to keep my child away from everybody. That was not it. It's funny, all the different judgments we make about other people.
Right.
And they probably thought that I was so pro homeschool. She was pro homeschool, and she was a good candidate for it. But here's what I've told other people over the years. Do what's right for you. Do what's right for your child. If I had 4 kids, I think I'd probably be like crazy if I had to homeschool 4 kids. It was a great season, worked out well. And you know what, too? I know of some parents who their kids were in school, and then maybe there were times that were challenging, and they took their kids out, and they homeschooled their kids, and they put them back later. So I would say, we don't always have to make one decision in life and stick with it, because sometimes circumstances are good and we do something, and then circumstances change, so we try something new. And I always think, what works for you? What's the best thing for your child? You follow what I'm saying? What's the energy telling you? And go with that, rather than saying it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way or this is the standard, because what works for one doesn't necessarily work for all.
Right. So for you, obviously, like, being wife, what I would say is something like I'm not say struggle or issue that like one of the issues of being in a marriage. What's what's one issue you can say that you guys have had to address that that might be like I'll say that's challenging, rather a challenging issue that you faced in marriage and you've gotten through, that you might be able to share with us.
When my husband and I first got married, we met in college, which meant that we were kind of in a different social environment. But when we did get married, it kind of brought us both back to our families of origin, and we soon got married. And very soon after that, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I'm seeing a pattern here. And in both cases, what I saw was both my husband's mother and my mother were very strong personalities. So strong to the point where the husbands sort of answered to the wives. I can remember when we first got married. Now, we got married in the Catholic Church, and back in the day, they wanted you to read different scriptures, like the wife is answerable to the husband. She's going to obey the husband. I'm like, are you kidding me? I didn't grow up to have to leave my house and answer now to a husband. I wanted to be like a co-equal with my husband. So the bottom of the line of this one was, I knew when we got married that somehow my husband and I needed to separate from the influence we both came out of, which was ultra strong women kind of calling all the shots for the men. To me, it wasn't healthy. So we ended up moving to Florida. by circumstance state. And as a result, I think what happened is that we just worked out a lot of kinks in our own marriage. And here we are many years later. And I have to tell you this is really interesting, is that I have the utmost respect for my husband. He has the utmost respect for me. We both have strengths. We both have weaknesses. We both have crossover points. And we both regard each other as our best friend. And so in many ways, it's like over the course of the years, what we learned is to glean from each other and to learn from each other and to give each other space so that we could both grow. And I think for us, when I think about us, I almost think about us as being pillars, like co-pillars. He's strong, I'm strong, but in our own ways. I don't try being a guy. He doesn't try being a woman. And we're just happy being what we are and very comfortable in that regard. But, you know, I'm sure there have been many things we dealt with over the course of years. I'm sure that would be another whole interview. But that was the big thing I recognized.
Right.
Sometimes we, in life, can end up coming from a certain environment and repeating it. And I didn't want that kind of a marriage where I'd be dictating to my husband. I just never wanted that in a relationship.
Yeah, I love that statement you mentioned. You don't try to be the man. He doesn't try to be the woman. That is that is such a strong. It's a strong statement that has to be said, at least in this this dating climate that, you know, I would say I'm currently in right now. So yeah, that's I think that's a very awesome statement that you mentioned there. So being the ambassador of happiness, what makes you happy?
I love seeing people get together without any agenda, have fun together, be their best, never feel like they have to hide their better qualities. And the reason why I could say all this is I mentioned earlier that I had this corporate career and I managed several branch offices for corporations that were located elsewhere. And here I was, I'm talking about like 20 and 30 years ago or over 20 years ago, managing or developing teams of people, men, women, younger, older, some people making more money, some people making less, different titles. And I found ways to make everybody get along. I'm not saying I force people to get along, but I know how to set great cultures of people that when they're focusing in on a bigger goal or a general goal, they end up being supportive of one another and encouraging and inspiring each other. That kind of an environment, that kind of culture, that kind of fun, that kind of celebrating everybody's goodness and everybody's talents, which is really the kind of cultures that I developed, I can't even tell you how happy that makes me. So everywhere I go, wherever I speak, whatever environment I'm in, I help to try to bring people into those mental and emotional spaces where they could get out of being, I need to be better than you, I need to compete with you, I need to pull you down. Because when we allow a different culture of happiness or lightness or celebrating everybody to get into the big picture, it's like the energy is so much better and everybody smiles and everybody feels great.
All right.
Makes me happy.
Oh, well, that's good. I would say for myself, I'm still trying to I'm learning, like the learning to love me aspect is what's currently in place. So trying to find that sense of you know, I would say my happy. You know what I mean? I don't put that happiness on anybody else. And I think for a very long time I was putting my happiness on everybody else, and now it's just about taking accountability and moving forward and doing what's what's best. So what is I'll say what inspired you to do what you do?
So the question again, like what made me decide to do it, or
Yeah. So what inspires you to do what you do, as far as like going around speaking, being the ambassador of happiness? What inspired you?
You know, I'm going to tell you, I could never get away from it. You know, in the years that I was home, let's say homeschooling, I had a lot of people. We had exchange students living with us. I was doing a lot of things at home. I was always an idea person. That's what I was. No matter where I was an idea person. And I really envisioned a better world. And I was always learning. I might have left law school midstream, but I never stopped learning and studying on my own. And I remember thinking one day, you know what? either I'm going to grow old like people do. You know, a lot of people, they reach a plateau in life. It could be 30 years old, and then they just start getting old and getting stuck. Or I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a difference in life. And so I just decided I'm going to see how much of an impact and an influence I could be for a better world.
So what is, I would say, the there might, and somewhat might be tied to that last question, what's the vision for your business?
At some level, you could call me a business, but really when I set out to do what I'm doing today, you might say it was like a dangerous, or an anti-establishment way of doing things. I didn't set out to make money. I set out for influence. Seriously, that was it. I thought I will go anywhere they invite me. I will go everywhere I can, and I will share my vision of what humanity should look like, be like, and treat each other like. And I remember saying to myself, you know what? If I could get the influence I want, and let me give you what I mean by influence. I don't so much have this ego, especially at my age, like, oh, look at me, aren't I great, or aren't I special, it's not that. If I could be in places, even privately, speaking with heads of countries, heads of huge media corporations, university presidents, I don't care who they are, and I'm in conversation with them and I could hear them say something because I know they're great influencers, and I can get them to see something they're doing and to see it from a better perspective where what their role is can positively impact other people rather than, let's say, take advantage of other people. Mm-hmm. That's my idea of influence. So, you know, like here we are today. I have no idea of where this interview is going to go, who it's going to reach, but I do know that there are people who are looking for a better way to be in the world and a better way to act in the world, and they're looking for a better world. And I just want people to see they can be that change, and they can be the, I want to say, the catalyst for a better world if they see themselves and the world through a better set of eyes. Okay. But that was my whole thing. I was looking for influence, and I knew that as my influence grew, so would my affluence.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. So we obviously know that you're a commanding woman. Anything you've set out to do, you've gone and done it. So what would you say, how hard was it to change careers at 50?
I'm going to tell you that for me, growing up thinking 30 was ancient and then I'd be dead by the time I was 30, imagine being like late 40s, early 50s and thinking, okay, I'm going to do now what some people coming out of college and have journalism degrees want to do. That. And this was like 10 years ago, and I really mentally, I felt like Methuselah. Remember Methuselah in the Bible? I think it was the oldest person ever recorded. Yeah. I felt that way. But you know what I did, John? And it was all very good, is I just pushed myself through. I thought, I know what I feel like. I know what mindset I have. But if what I want to accomplish is that important to me, then whatever happens, I'm just going to keep pressing through. And I'll give you an example. This was interesting. When I was very small, I wanted to learn how to dance, but that wasn't part of a future attorney's life. So instead, I ended up with piano lessons. I didn't start taking dance classes until I was almost 50 years old. And I enrolled at a local college, and I can't even tell you how old, decrepit, and afraid, filled with emotional, mental baggage, not to mention the fact that I had 2 left feet, all went together with enrolling and taking dance classes. But you know what I did? I kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until a lot of the mental baggage went away. And what it did is it freed me. I became so much happier. I ended up becoming much more who I wanted to be as a young person. It came a little bit later, but it also launched my Art of Happiness books. And my first book was called Exiting the Comfort Zone, Dance or Die. And when I started to learn how to dance at 50 years old, I was exiting a comfort zone. I had never been in that zone before. And I just went there. People laughed at me at class. I almost ruined an onstage performance. But I thought, you know what? There's something in here I need to keep pressing through, because when I get to the other side of it, I'm going to feel happier, freer, and more authentically me. And that's exactly what I got out of it at the end of it. So sometimes we can go through some of the hardest things in our lives, but if something on the inside of us knows there's a bigger piece of us yet to come out, the journey is worth the horrific trip along the way. You're like losing our ego, looking like an idiot, tripping and falling. Follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
But the end result is I feel better about myself. I have learned to laugh at myself. I've learned how to overcome things. And even in the process, John, when we grow like that, we end up with a lot more compassion for other people who are going through trying times and want to grow too.
Okay. Being an ambassador of happiness, do you ever find yourself having bad days?
Of course. This whole thing about being the ambassador of happiness, I think sometimes people first hear it and it sounds good on one level and they're thinking on another, oh, she's probably lives in denial land. But when I was small, I spent several years where I was not happy. I didn't like the way I was being channeled into a certain career. I didn't like the way I had to stay away from certain kids or only do certain things. But I decided as a child I would grow up to be a happy and free adult. And so a lot of what I share, whether it is as a speaker, through my e-course, in my books that are a lot about the stories of life, through my podcasts, I help other people in life places that we all go through where we have to say to ourselves, all right, something just happened to me here. I feel like a victim. I'm mad. I'm sad. I feel defeated, deflated, embarrassed. How am I going to get over this? Because a lot of being happy is really a state of mind. And you have to say to yourself, am I going to be a victim or am I going to see this as something ultimately good? And that's really where I go into that space with. So anyone that follows me on a routine basis will know that I may be called the ambassador of happiness because I really want to see a happier and more harmonious society. But what's behind that is all of my life work on getting over my own stumbling blocks, emotional blocks, mental blocks of, oh, I feel like poor me, or oh, look what happened to me, or oh, how am I going to overcome this? And I just share it with others so that as they kind of pick up some of the tips and tricks I've been through, they can become self-leaders and self-influencers faster than maybe the journey it took me to get there.
Okay. So how do you handle the emotions that completely devastate most people?
I learned to do this as a child. I think when I was very small, I would go up to my bedroom upstairs and I would reframe the thoughts of my mind and reframe my emotions. Because we can very easily be slaves to our emotions, slaves to what happens to us in the moment. And I remember thinking as a child, because I used to cry a lot when I was little. I was very emotional and felt like, oh, poor me, right? But I decided that doesn't feel too good. If you want to kind of live that way, John, it's not happy. It doesn't help anybody. So I had to make several decisions over the course of my life. Do I want to stay here or am I going to let go of it? And one of the big things I learned as a child is I am not going to hold a grudge because holding a grudge doesn't feel good. So I'm going to let it go. And I'm going to feel better as a result of not being angry or not holding a grudge against somebody else. So that was just one of many decisions I made along the way. And so that's what all of our lives are. We could have somebody fires us from a job. We could have somebody breaks up with us, right? Somebody blares their car at us in the morning and gets us started off on the wrong foot. Somebody tells us off publicly and we feel terribly. So we could either say, I'm going to live in that space and feel like poor me, or what am I going to do about it? How can I reframe it and rephrase it so this could be beneficial? And that's really what I do, what I continue to do. And I think when people are around me, they know that what I speak about and who I am are one and the same thing, because I don't just talk about things. I've lived through the things too. Right. And people relate.
Okay. So obviously, when you're a very hard working woman. You go around speaking and all these other things. So let me ask you, what do you do for enjoyment outside of your work? What brings joy to Maura? Excuse me.
I work out almost every day. Fortunately, where I live, we have a local spa. So I love going to yoga classes, Zumba classes. I love getting out on my bike. We live here in Florida, so I'm in good weather. And this is going to sound crazy. So I love doing that. I love working out, and I have a lot of friends that I work out with whose personalities are very upbeat and healthy-minded. Maybe they focus in on good things. I enjoy that. I love going to places like the grocery store where I could just interact with perfect strangers. I love it. I love going to see live performances. I love getting together with people and sharing ideas. So there's a lot of things, but most of it will have to do with being around people I enjoy. And I'll tell you, one of the other things I love doing at night, at a certain hour, my husband and I, we each take a couch. We put the TV on. Oftentimes we'll binge watch a series like, sometimes there'll be, Law and Order or whatever the modern day version of that might be.
Okay.
And he'll have a glass of wine, I'll have a glass of wine. We'll watch it, we'll get immersed, we'll talk about life. And I just love the time with my husband too. And I love traveling.
Okay. You mentioned, I was going to go into the next question. I was asking if you're a wine drinker. So what is your wine of choice?
Oh, I'm terrible. I have to tell you this. I will have an occasional glass of red wine, but there are some people that are wine connoisseurs. I couldn't even tell you. All I know is I'll have occasionally a glass of wine. I'll be like, this is really good, and I couldn't tell you what the name is, and I don't think it has anything to do with the cost of the bottle of wine. I just know that there's some I like more than others. So, but it's a nice way. Like, I love to sit over dinner and have a glass of wine and laugh and chat and share ideas and stories, but I couldn't tell you my favorite wine. Sorry about that.
No problem. Me, I'm more like Moscato or, I'd say probably like a Moscato.
Is that the sweet wine?
Yeah, that's the sweet one. Yeah.
Guess what? Because I'm really not a drinker, never was a hard drinker.
Right.
This is a funny thing. They have port wine. I never get to drink it, but that's almost like a dessert wine. I love that.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Moscato is awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, I love it. So this e-course that you have, what can you tell us about that?
Okay, I will tell you, I created this e-course, which has things to read about, things to watch, things to listen to, stories, questions and answers. I did it and created it because after I would speak somewhere or do an interview, people would be like, wow, Maura, I know that you're making connections with me, and how could you explain this to me more? And I found myself writing such lengthy responses to people's emails that finally I thought, oh my gosh, and I'm not so much one-on-one with teaching people, so I put it all together in an e-course, and it's about, I think it's 6 different modules, and what it does with people is it brings them through a mental, an emotional, a self-narrative space. It even goes into, what do you think about the backdrop of your mind? What do you think about the nature of God? What do you think about the universe? Is this a safe place? Is it an unsafe place? What are some of the biggest lies you ever told yourself? And what it really does over the course of the course, because it's very you kind of work on your own time frame to do this, is it helps you learn how to deconstruct parts of your mind and your emotional life that maybe is not working to your best interest, and helps you become a self-leader. Someone who, instead of feeling like life is leading you down the wrong way, that you actually learn how to be the navigator of your life. And in the course of doing it, you end up feeling a lot more self-actualized. In fact, you know what? Let me just give you something. You didn't ask me this, but let me
I'll take it. I'll take whatever you got. Go ahead.
All right. One of the things I've done, in addition to traveling to, I guess it's maybe over 60 countries at this point, and speaking in many of them, is that I started conducting this global happiness survey. So I've got hundreds and hundreds of people I've interviewed on the topic of happiness, many of whom are from the United States, and many of them who are from overseas. And all I said to them, after getting a little bit on their background, I said, describe to me in 50 words or less how you would define happiness. And listen to this, because I think that if you listen to the answer to this, and then you want to think about my e-course, it all works together. People, no matter where they are, no matter their academic background, no matter the political background, doesn't matter. This is what everybody's looking for to define happiness. Number one, they're looking for healthy relationships, meaning relationships that are not high drama. Healthy relationships. The second thing they want is peace of mind. The third thing they want is a sense of freedom in their life. The fourth thing is purpose and fulfillment. And the fifth thing is personal confidence. Now think about that. If you could live in that place, you've got healthy relationships, you could put your head to bed at night and you feel a peace of mind, a sense of rest. You feel freedom to be who you want to be. You feel like what you do during the day has a sense of purpose and fulfillment, and you've gained personal confidence. You know what? All those elements of the way people describe happiness is what my e-course leads people to do by figuring it out through the stories I tell, the questions I ask, and the paths I bring people on.
All right. So with all the countries that you visit, do you have like a favorite rather? Like a favorite place that you visited before, one that stands out?
I try wherever I go to find something special about wherever I go.
Right.
Like just last week I was in Tunisia. I'd never been there, but I wanted to go there for a couple of years. I loved it. Loved the people, loved the food, everything. But I'm going to tell you this. I think out of all the places, I might say Italy. And I think it might be part of the food. It might be part of the way in which they design things. I think there's something about Italy I really like. But, as I said, I could go to any place and find something I do like. But I think there's something there that might be kind of near and dear to my heart.
Okay. Let's see here. What does it mean when you say live happy inside out?
I use that as my staple for all of my podcasts. If you're interested in living happy from the inside out, you'll want to look at today's question. Because most people, I would say in society, they're taught to live happy from the outside, meaning, if I could be thinner, if I just looked better, if I could have the better car, the better girl, the better guy, if I had more money. So they think that by searching for things outside of themselves, they're going to be happy. And what happens is that with that outside externalized way of looking at the world, it's like happiness can always leave you or lose you or elude you any moment of the day. So I kind of figured this out as a young person. If I'm going to have a happy outside life, I've got to start by being happy on the inside. I've got to like me first. I've got to be true to myself first. I've got to know what's important to me first. And then as I live in that space, then I can be happy on the outside of my life too. Mm-hmm. And it goes right back to, am I going to see myself as a victim on the inside? Then I knew if I saw myself as a victim, I'm not going to be happy on the outside. So everything I do, everything I speak about really does go back to those four words, living happy from the inside out. And I think if all of us could learn how to do that, it's almost like living from your heart, living from your soul, living from that intuitive space that kind of really knows things apart from all the vicissitudes of life, and all the drama of life. Yeah. And if we could kind of be true to that inner person that we are, we'll be better in our careers. We'll be better in the choices of our relationships. We'll make decisions for better reasons. And I think we would not only be happier ourselves, but if we're happier, then we help make the rest of society happier too.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. What was it like releasing your first book? Were you nervous, anxious, all of the above? I mean, what feelings?
Say proud, like I can't believe I finally did it. My first book was called Exiting the Comfort Zone. Okay. It was a short book, and it's one of 6 that I have on Amazon. And you know what? It was my story of doing something I wanted to do when I was a little kid, namely dancing, and never did until later on. It made me so happy to be able to tell a harrowing story of pursuing a dream and a desire that I knew would make me happy if I could just learn how to dance. Not because I had to perform on stage, but because for me, I think dancing was just fun and it was social. And being able to share with other people what it's like to pursue your dream and go through like the twilight zone of experiences of, oh my gosh, I'm terrible, I'm a failure, people are laughing at me, I look like an idiot, I want to cry, and yet I know somehow at the end of this, there's a good ending. And so by the time that first book came out, I felt proud, happy, and people said to me, you know, Maura, after reading your book about learning how to dance starting at age 50 and seeing what you went through, I feel like I could run for president and run the world, because I bring everybody in on the very story of their own lives of pursuing a dream and going for it even when you're going to look like a fool along the way. So I'm going to say my answer was happy and proud, because what I had was not only my story, but it was a story I wanted others to relate to in their own lives so that they would be inspired to pursue their own happiness and their own dreams.
Okay, so do you have a favorite book that you've read, let's say right now, or reading right now?
Ooh, right now I'm reading a book called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. Never heard of the guy, or Colin Tipping?
Right.
Because I'm going to be interviewed on it tomorrow from a woman who is out in Australia. And I'm going to tell you, I sort of know this in my own mind and in my own life, because remember I told you I'd learned as a child, it's not worth your happiness to hold unforgiveness against anybody. And yet this is a new book. I'm reading it right now. I'll be done with it by tonight, so I could talk about it tomorrow. I love it because it connects something that relates to all of us. You know, we live in a world that, especially right now, it's getting its jollies off of making everybody feel isolated. Let me think. You know, there's a lot of identity politics going on in the world. Like, oh, well, I only see myself as a white female, you know, age 50-something or 60-something. And other people are like, well, I'm a black male, or, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a Hispanic. You know what? I am in the space of, we're all here on planet Earth. We all came from the same place. We're all going to go back to the same place. So what are we going to do while we're here to make this the best place and the best space we could ever be in? And that's why I'm very passionate about this book, the messages of it, and how we could literally live our lives and be connectors, uniters, and uplifters of humanity while we're here, and make everybody happy and ourselves happier, and let's say feeling more at peace while we're here. So, Radical Forgiveness, Colin Tipping. Today's good book.
Colin Tipping, free promotion right here.
Yeah, there you go.
But
I could be even mispronouncing his name, but
yeah,
that's it.
Somebody's going to Google it right now. They're typing it on their phone as they're listening.
Right.
Let's say, so as far as podcasting goes, how long have you been a podcaster?
Oh, you know, I probably started, I want to say maybe 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I did it as an extension to my blogging and my books and my many media interviews and my public speaking. And you know what? I did it because podcasts, are a really great way to get one-on-one with people. And my podcast, they ask a question, they tell a life story, and they give a call to action. And it's all based on how are you going to see your life from the inside out. And they're maybe 10 minutes in length. And believe it or not, they actually became like another extension to what I do. They've helped a lot of people, and they actually helped me get my first international speaking engagement. So I just enjoy it. So
let me ask you, getting back to being married, and maybe you could help like some others that are listening in, maybe wondering how they keep the fire going in a marriage. You and your husband have been together for some time. So what I would say advice could you get, which could both of you really give to anyone else trying to make sure they keep the marriage going, keep the fire going in the relationship, and
All right, you know what? I would say, and I'm going to tell you, this is perfectly, like, this goes on every day in our household. My husband has his own things that he likes. He was always into sports. Me, I've never been into sports. We both will encourage each other to pursue the things we like and we're interested in. And that freedom we give to each other is so powerful. Secondly, we have an enormous amount of trust for each other and respect. And I'll tell you this, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the way we're both designed. We don't have power struggles, and I want to say we don't have egos. There's a lot of people, if they feel like they're not getting enough attention, they're going to go look elsewhere. I know my husband would send me anywhere, and he does, all around the world, providing they're safe places. But I could go on my own. He'll never think, oh, is my wife going to fool around? I don't have that desire in me. Same with my husband. And that's a really unique thing we have, because we love each other as friends, as people, as partners, as husband and wife. And there's something in that bond that allows each one of us to encourage each other to grow as much as we want without controlling.
Right.
And I think that's a really big thing. So you have to kind of be mature. You have to know yourself. And that's not saying we're any better or any worse than anybody else. It's just the way we're both designed. And I'm going to just tell you, we look at each other sometimes. It's not like we've had the perfect life. Everybody has stresses. But I'll tell you, we almost feel like we were put together for a reason, for whatever we're both called to do. And somehow we both strengthen each other along that path. But I would say respect and admire, and don't compete with your spouse or your significant other.
Right.
See what's best in them, honor them for what's best in them. And I'm going to tell you, if you keep doing that, you'll cause each other to shine.
Awesome. Okay. Well, with that being said about the marriage, I'm gonna ask this: has there ever been a time, and you could either decline or or accept the let's say the question, but
Sure.
Has there ever been a time where, let's say, because I'm sure you travel a lot, and again, I'm sure that there's come a time where someone, I would say, like a guy or somebody that may try to approach you, you know what I mean? Maybe knowing you're married, not knowing you're married. How did have you guys ever had to face that? And if so, how did you guys ever deal with that? Let's say even on his end, where a woman may have found taken a liking to him or something like that. How would because again, our listeners, we all face these things in our life. So just kind of words of encouragement of what you can do or should do rather when faced with such scenarios.
I have a couple of scenarios in mind. I told you I had and I'm going to answer it in a couple of different ways, and people could do with it whatever they want. I mentioned I had a corporate background, and I was managing down here in Florida. And from an early age, I was probably my late 20s, I was offered various promotions, and they would have required at some level for me to travel more frequently, meaning on a regular basis. And back when I was in my late 20s, I was this skinny, I'm sure you hear a certain amount of confidence that has come to me now, right?
Yeah.
But back then, I knew that because I was not maybe as strong as I am today, I knew enough. Number one, I didn't want to go travel out of a suitcase every single, 3 weeks out of a month for a corporate job to make more money. Number two, I knew at the time that and this is again a couple of decades ago, that if I were showing up at the same hotels where other traveling men were, that I could be somebody else's target, and I didn't want to put myself in that position. And I always imagined myself that if I did say yes to jobs like that, I'd end up having dinner in my hotel room rather than out in a hotel restaurant, because I wouldn't want to put myself in a place like that. So I'm going to tell you, my short answer was I wouldn't put myself in places where I didn't have the confidence to just walk away and say, get out of my face, or I'm not interested. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because I was this skinny person, and I think I saw myself as a child. And so what if there was an older man who wanted to influence me? I just wouldn't want to put myself in that place, so I wouldn't. That was number one. I'm going to tell you some other things. With my husband, he was in sales for many, many years and sold to big corporations. And this is a reality of life, too. And I remember him coming home a couple of times and say, Maura, I've got a couple of people at my main account that want me to entertain people at these so-called gentleman clubs where there's going to be naked women. And he said, I know that I could run the risk of losing some of my clients if I say no. But he said, I have to tell you, I'm not going to play this game. And he said, I want you to know I could lose some clients. And I remember one day somebody said, well, Jimmy, don't you want to take us all out to the such and such a club? And this was a woman asking, meaning that, he'd be buying drinks and there'd be girls dancing on poles. And you know what he said? Well, maybe I should ask my wife if she'd like to join us. He said, really, that's not what I do. He wasn't rude the way he said it, but he kind of made it known, this is not the way I play.
Right.
And the other thing he does, like, we travel all the time. I've got my own business cards. He's got his own business cards. Like, he's been in many places, and he'll say, if somebody wants to take my picture, they want me to dance. He said, I'm just not going to dance with another woman. He said, it's just the way I am. And he said, the other thing I'll do, and he said, Maura, it has nothing to do with me. He said, but other people sometimes get delusional. He said, often if there's a woman I'm going to pass my business card to, I'll always write on the back of the card your name. And, funny thing, even with me, if I find there's certain people, they're saying, oh, Maura, you're an international speaker. Do you have a card? And I'll say to them, hey, and by the way, why don't you connect with my husband? Here's his business card. Here's what he does. So I will always reference my husband. They know that we come as a package deal. I may not be with him. He may not be with me all the time. But we're a package deal. And so it's almost like nicely letting people know we're happy the way we are.
Yeah, definitely. I can respect that.
But, I'm also going to tell you this, too. This is another thing, and maybe I consider it a safety valve. Like I'll say to a lot of people, I'm old enough to be your mother. It's just a nice way. I couldn't say when I'm 25, 29, I'm old enough to be your mother. But now it's like, sorry, I'm old enough to be your mother. My daughter's your age. Or, you know what I'm saying? Or like, this is so beyond me. And I could make light of things that when you're younger, maybe that's a bigger thing when people are looking to connect with somebody. So I gave you a couple of different examples, but I hope that's helpful.
Yes, definitely helpful. Okay. Thank you so much for that. What is like? I know you guys said that you binge watch series. Do you watch any these? I would say the most talked about series that are out right now, like let's say Game of Thrones, or I don't know what would really interest you and your husband. But
I'll tell you what one we're watching now. I love it. Designated Survivor.
Oh wow, yeah, I saw that.
I'll tell you why I really like that. I've always been, and our daughter's like this too. This was like what we would do as a family. We would always end up being drawn to these movies where, there's a big decision that needs to be made. There's a lot of suspense, and how would we handle these decisions? I always like things like that. But Designated Survivor, I really like, because it's a great story about someone who finds himself unexpectedly in a huge position of responsibility, and somehow, despite the odds, despite public pressure, public awareness, he'll always seek to do the better thing. And I'm going to tell you, that's it's a real life story in a sense, but I'm drawn to it because I'm very much into real life, but I'm always into what's redemptive. And I see a lot of things that go on, and there's a lot of shows my husband and I start watching, then it gets trashy, disgusting, despicable, and there is nothing redemptive. It's like, okay, I had enough of this stuff.
Right.
But that's our new thing, Designated Survivor.
Yeah, I had heard
so far, so good.
I had heard about Designated Survivor. My mom and dad were very big 24 fans. So
my daughter and husband used to love that one.
They were big 24 fan. I've yet to get into the 24. That's on the to-do list. I say for me, like, I just decided to I guess give into the hype of Game of Thrones. Like, I had tried watching Game of Thrones many times before, and then I would always get I would lose interest. And but for whatever reason, I started the year, the start of this year is like, okay, I'm just going to binge watch it and see where it goes and see where all the hype comes from. And overall, I mean, like, it's basically medieval porn. I like to call it that.
All right.
But and then you have like these plot twists, and they say you should never get attached to a character in the show because one of them probably going to die. It's gonna happen. But I mean, overall, I think it's a pretty good show. I'm not like as hyped about the show as many others I'm sure are, but overall, I follow it. But that's like for me, that my life really consists of a lot of listening to a lot of podcasts, because that's something that I wanted to do and doing now. So that's I kind of built its way into my daily routine, is just listen to a lot of podcasts, and like studying different podcasters, their techniques, how well they speak, their tones in which they speak, and just the nature of things that they will discuss. That just just something I wanted to add. Let's see here. Before we close
We
this.
should be. Well, I was just about to say
Yeah. I didn't recognize the time. I'm drawing so much over. Let's say, so before we get out of here, let's say, what words of encouragement would you say to someone who's looking for motivation to follow their passion, being someone in your field?
Okay, I would say, as a life lesson or as a life advice to anybody, take a couple of minutes for yourself every day by yourself. Morning, let's say before you set out in the day, and then at night before you go to sleep at night. And I'll tell you why. We are all bombarded with social messages that tell us who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to like, what we're supposed to go after. Not to mention relationships that could be overlaying our better judgment. If you could take 5 minutes every day to say, what's the best thought? What's the overriding thought that I want to lead my day with? And you could start listening to your soul and holding on to that thought, you will start to learn how to navigate your own life. And when I say navigate it, navigating it from the inside, there's somebody on the inside of you that your soul knows, that your soul wants to be and become and grow into in a great way. And it doesn't matter on what scale and in which direction, but it's the greatness that is in you that's looking to become all of you. If you could learn to take a few minutes every morning and spend it just quietly with your own thoughts, with your own soul, with your own quiet space, and then at the end of every day, listen in again. Where was the best part of my day? Where did I feel most empowered? Where was I most like myself? Where did I feel most energized, most inspired? And start to learn to follow those leadings from the inside of your life, the quiet spaces. You'll literally learn how to navigate and lead yourself into becoming your best, your brightest, your most beautiful, your most glorious self, and probably your most happy and confident self. And when you do that, you will find that the world outside of you changes, and you'll also be something of a world changer. So that's my advice.
How, if you want to go ahead and give your, let's say, your contact information, or places where we can reach you and get more content and learn, learn more about Maura and living happy inside out. So
okay, well, since you have a listening audience, my podcast I would lead them to is Maura Sweeney, Living Happy Inside Out. And you could find that on several platforms. And the other thing I'd love for your listeners to do is find me and subscribe to me on my website. It's my name, Maura, M as in Mary, A-U-R-A, the number 4, the letter U.com, Maura4U.com, because I'm always for you. And they could subscribe, get the blogs. I have over 200 videos. I have books. They could write to me. So that's it, Maura4U.com, and find me as a podcaster as Maura Sweeney, Living Happy Inside Out. Okay. And I'd love to hear from anyone. And if there's anyone listening that ever wants a speaker to come in and energize their group and help them change the way they think and therefore change their lives and the futures of their world and the world around them, give me a call and reach out to me on my website.
Awesome. So let me ask you one more thing before we close it out. Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
Doing some of what I'm doing today, but on a larger scale. Not necessarily working all that hard, but being in places where whatever essence, whatever messages, and whatever culture, when I say culture, it's a winning culture for everyone, a united culture for everyone to to thrive, being who they are and being their best self, using their best talents in the world. It could be dealing with heads of nations, heads of major organizations, any place where people need to gather together in places and spaces that will uplift humanity. The bigger, the better. Seriously. If they want me at the UN, although I tell you, UN needs some help, I'll go there too. But I see myself just always reaching bigger audiences as audiences are ready for a message that says, you know what, first of all, it's not all about me because I'm sharing this planet with other people. It's all about all of society becoming all we can be together and harmoniously. And I feel 5 years from now, the world is going to wake up even more than where it is today. And my messages and the influence that I bring into the world and into this space will be in even greater demand than it is today.
Okay. Well, Maura, I want to thank you so much for your time and like I said, the opportunity to get to know an interview of you, and what you bring to the table. I wish you so much blessings and success going forward. But is there anything that you want to add, for me before we shut everything down?
Other than to wish you so well and to go, I know your name's John McAllister. Before we started speaking, I said, go with Romey. You're such a Romey. And I would just say, I could feel the passion and the interest that you have. And the very things that you're doing today, Romey, as an individual, is what I would encourage and inspire everyone to do. And that is follow those leanings and those curiosities and those things you want to get good at. Just keep doing more and more of it. And eventually, the world makes room for you. And you, in the process of doing that work, become the expert you always wanted to be. And you're already on the road. So that's my advice for you. And I would say beyond that, thanks for inviting me to be on your show today.
All right. Well, this is Romey-Mak, and we're here with Miss Maura Sweeney. And this is the interview with Rome. Be sure to check that out. Thank you, guys.